Welcome back to Tuesdays with Tim, the podcast that touches on all things related to brain injuries among children and those who have been impacted by my son Luke. Today we have a very special guest, Darsey Marshall. Darsey, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Darsey, first tell us a little bit about your family.
Well, I have 3 children. I'm married. My oldest daughter is 24 and she's married. And then I have my special needs child, Ty Marshall, and then I have a son that's 17.
And obviously you're from Lubbock, and we know a lot of the same people. When did you first hear about Luke's accident?
Gosh, right away. As soon as it happened, I heard about it.
And I know that Luke has been so well known, his accident and things that happened at the time, but what was really special is so many people came to visit Luke in the hospital, and we probably had 50 to 100 people for the first few weeks that Luke was in the hospital. And you had mentioned to me that you had actually come to the room to see Luke, but you're also there to see someone else.
Yes, I was there to see my special needs son's little girlfriend, very special, Hannah is her name. And when I walked in, Luke was right beside Hannah, and it was late at night, I bet midnight, and no one was in Luke's room, so I just stepped in there and I said a little prayer over him and Hannah Grace and just prayed for both of them.
And Luke was there on July 28th, and Hannah Grace passed away a few days later, and of course you said that Ty's girlfriend and was very close with Hannah Grace, and Hannah Grace was such a special little girl. So we had seen each other then, but then in June, Ty had a stroke and was then doing rehab at Trust Point in Lubbock, where Luke was doing rehab.
Yes, he was, and we saw Luke several times.
In the gym, doing some.
Yes.
And we had met, and I had come outside to see you and Ty. That was the first time I had actually met Ty, and it was a very special moment for me to see him and to talk to you. And he was doing well with rehab. And how long was he doing rehab?
I think we were there 2 or 3 weeks. We got to go home earlier than expected because they thought he would do better at home with his family than being cooped up in that room, not with his surroundings, and just being home with his siblings. And
then he had a major brain surgery later on. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, September 28th was a 9-hour brain surgery. Do you want to know about like the blood vessels? They had to take some blood vessels because Ty has a disease called moyamoya disease, which affects 1 in a million people. And the blood vessels dissolve in the head, in the front of his head. And they were going to put some new blood vessels in there and hope they grow like a tree branch to give him more oxygen and blood supply up there to stop the strokes and the seizures. And so, yeah, it was a major surgery. We didn't know what the outcome would be.
What did the doctors tell you going into surgery?
They just said, there's a lot of risk in it, but we need to do it because if we don't, he's going to keep having strokes and seizures. And they said that he could have a stroke or a seizure on the table. He could have hemorrhaging. But we just prayed and everything went good.
How old was Ty at the time?
21.
So at 21, in 2021, he had this surgery. It was a 9-hour surgery. And the doctors had told you that there was a chance that he wouldn't know who you were. But when you walked into the room, the doctors then had said the surgery went well, and then you were confident that he would know who you were. Tell me Ty's reaction to you then.
Yes. They took Ty back, I think, around 7:30 that morning, hardest morning of my life. And the doctors came out at 5 and said we could see him shortly. And around 7 o'clock, we got to go into the ICU room. And he was crying, and he says, "Mama, I've been crying for you." And I said, "I'm right here, and I'm not leaving your side again."
And then after that, he said something to you about his good friend.
Yes, he said, "Mama, I saw Hannah Grace today, and she was smiling and dancing, and Mom, she was so beautiful."
So those of you that are listening, think about what Darsey just said, that he had this surgery and he saw Hannah Grace singing and dancing, and Hannah Grace had passed away in the same time that Luke was in the hospital in 2015. And so that must have, I don't know what the word is. Explain to me when you heard that.
Well, it wasn't really that big of a surprise to me because he does talk about Hannah all the time. He'll tell me he has seen her or talked to her in the past. So it didn't really surprise me when he said he saw Hannah. What surprised me is he went on and on and on about how beautiful heaven was, and that, do you want me to go ahead and talk about? And then he came up and he said, and you know who else I saw, Mom? And I said, who? And he said, Luke. And I said, Luke? And he said, yes, me and Hannah were sitting there or playing, and Luke walked up with a baseball in his hand. And we all went off and played together.
You know, when you say it, and this is the first time I've heard you say it to me in person, but whenever I share the story, I get chills because he didn't know Luke played baseball.
No.
And Luke has a baseball in his hand, and then he said that they went out and played baseball or played catch. And that's what Luke and I did every single day. And I don't even know if Luke knew Ty. They had never met.
Yeah.
And so when he said that to you, what was your reaction?
I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was like, oh my gosh. And I thought it was beautiful. I mean, I was glad he was in a happy place during this major surgery.
For him to say that I saw Luke Siegel with a baseball in his hand, for me, whenever I share the story, it reiterates, Luke in heaven, that Luke had a baseball in his hand because Ty had never known that Luke played baseball. And so that was not a coincidence that you hear so often.
Yeah, he's a special needs child. It's, what he says, you believe because he doesn't know how to just make stuff up.
You then said something to me a couple of days ago, which you had never shared before. What else did he say?
Well, he talked about heaven for a long time that night, and then at the end he said, Mama, Jesus kissed me on the forehead and told me I was going to be okay.
So if you are listening and you're not sure about heaven, you're not sure about God, you're not sure about things that touch you in a way, this story certainly does that. And, to have you here in person. And when you shared this story with me, I remember you might have even said to me, we were on the phone, I think it was December, a couple of months after surgery.
Yes.
And I think you may have even asked me if I was sitting down because and I had heard this from a friend. And then when you told me this, I just couldn't believe what I heard. It's a very special thing for me to hear this story.
It's a beautiful story.
It's a beautiful story. And for Ty to share that with you. And you had also mentioned that Ty is not someone who's going to just speak unless spoken to.
Right. He's not a big conversation. I mean, he talks to me and our family, but he won't speak to other people unless they speak to him first.
In my book, Fight Like Luke, Transforming Grief into Love, Strength, and Faith, I have a chapter. And the chapter is called Baseball in Heaven. And it's all about the story that you just shared. And it's just so special and so heartwarming for me. And, Darsey, you've been living in Lubbock for all these years, and we have a lot of the same friends. Can you touch on Luke's impact that you have felt in this community and then within your family?
Oh, gosh. My son is just a year younger than Luke. And so, the boys, he's friends with all of Luke's buddies, and actually right now he plays basketball with a lot of the boys, and Luke has impacted a lot of people. His story has, and Ty's story has impacted a lot of people in this community. They're just special stories.
And I think that's what we talked about this earlier, that both of our children have impacted and inspired so many people. Tell us how much you've seen that in the community with your son, Ty.
Oh, Ty. Since his surgery, we don't get out as much, but when he was younger, we couldn't go anywhere without someone knowing Ty. We'd go to the park and someone would come up and say something, or just anywhere, baseball fields, because my kids all played sports. The gym for volleyball, People knew Ty. They knew Ty and Hannah. They just knew them. They were very outgoing kids, and yeah.
Very special. I had mentioned too earlier that it's been very difficult for me to go to the high school because Luke would be a senior. Luke would be 18 years old, actually on April 18th, and all of his friends that he played sports with are seniors. And I'd always made it a point to support them, but it was just so difficult for me. But I did go to a basketball game where your son was playing, and two of Luke's friends were playing, and the boy that was on the golf cart with Luke, I had texted him prior to the game, and I said, do me a favor and hit a 3 for Luke. And the very first possession, he hit a 3. Did you know about that?
He sure did. I saw it.
Yeah, and that was another moment where I had chills up and down my spine and my arms. So,
and he wears the uniform 3.
That's right. He wears number 3, and I'd like to share another quick story with you. So 2 days ago, I spoke to the Oklahoma State women's tennis team, and I shared the story, 7 Inspirations from Luke, and I asked one of the team who plays number 3 on the team, because at the McLeod Tennis Center at Texas Tech, there's number 3 court is the Luke Siegel court. And so she put up her hand, a sweet girl from Argentina, a heck of a tennis player. And at the match, she won the clinching match, and she put up her left hand to me with the Fight Like Luke bracelet. And I got choked up because I realized at that very moment the impact that Luke is making. Here's a girl from Argentina playing on the number 1 ranked team in the country, and felt so much pride wearing this bracelet. And after the match, she told me she's always going to fight like Luke. And so the impact that he's making, the impact that Ty is making is profound. And that's certainly my goal in life, is to help families all over the country who've had children with brain injuries, and also to do this with and for Luke. And most importantly, to keep Luke's legacy alive, and the impact that Ty is making each and every day, the impact that Luke is making is just beautiful, as you said. And the story, though, that you've just shared, it just touches so many hearts. And I appreciate your calling me about it. I know you were hesitant to see if this is a story that I wanted to hear. And I share this story every time I give a speech. I talk about baseball in heaven with Ty Marshall. So, Darsey, thank you so much for being here this morning, and thank you so much for sharing Ty to the world, and you're making an impact. And the one thing I can tell you about Ty is a wonderful mom, so thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me tell Ty's story.
Thanks again. On the morning of August 19th, 2021, at 8:39 in the morning is when Luke passed away. You told me that you knew exactly when this happened. How'd you hear?
My husband was at his office, and Ty was at rehab working with a therapist named Emily, and my husband texted and said that Luke had just passed away, and I knew Emily worked with Luke. And I think my face expression she was like, "What is wrong?" And I said, "Luke just passed away." And she said, "You got to give me a minute." And she walked away and came back.
So the significance of our children, the fact that Ty was working with Emily, who was Luke's incredible physical therapist, and was with Luke 3 days a week at Trust Point, and the fact that you found this news out at the very moment she was working with Ty is just another example of a God thing, I believe. And I just want to thank you for sharing your heart, your story, and Ty with all of us, and thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So you can edit however